Islam Makhachev didn't just walk into UFC 322 and claim a second belt. He walked in and broke the system. This wasn't a win or even a domination. It was a dismantling so complete that the entire welterweight division suddenly looked small. And the proof was written all over Jack Della Maddalena's face. He wasn't just losing positions, he looked like a man who realized in real time that there was no way out. What made it even stranger is how the experts reacted. Everyone saw the same fight, but nobody could agree on why it looked so lopsided. Some blamed Jack's decisions, others said Islam was simply built different. A few even claimed the matchup was cruel from the start. But the real explanation? It's deeper, darker, and reveals cracks inside the UFC's entire structure, cracks that Islam just exposed for the whole world to see. From the moment Jack Della Maddalena sat on his stool after the first round, you could see it, the shift in his eyes, the silent admission that something was terribly wrong. His face didn't show fear, it showed realization. A realization that every escape route he'd prepared, every scramble he'd drilled, every plan his team built, was already dead. Jack wasn't just behind on the scorecards, he was drowning. His corner saw it too. The frustration in their voices wasn't anger, it was desperation. They kept pushing him to stand his ground, to reset, to fight the fight they practiced. But how do you reset when you've spent nearly an entire round pinned to the canvas by a man who feels like gravity wearing gloves? By the end of the fight, Islam had racked up 19 minutes of control time, a number so brutal it belongs in a wrestling clinic, not a world title fight. And here's the part casual fans miss: this isn't disrespect toward Jack. If anything, it proves how insane his toughness really is. He could have tapped, he could have rolled over, he could have stopped resisting and saved himself the punishment. But even as his spirit cracked, he never quit. Islam's domination wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, technical, suffocating, a type of mental warfare that breaks you long before the final horn. He didn't just beat Jack physically, he made him understand the gap. But one man saw it clearer than everyone. Kamaru Usman watched the fight like a man seeing the future of his old division, and he didn't sugarcoat a thing. To him, this wasn't normal control time or even elite-level dominance. Usman said Islam didn't just control Jack, he owned him, dictating every inch of the cage with a composure that didn't make sense for someone moving up a weight class. Usman kept pointing out the same thing over and over: Islam's calmness. Not a single heavy breath between rounds, no panic in the scrambles, no hesitation in transitions. It was as if he'd fought this matchup 10 times already and was simply running the final simulation. At 170 against a natural welterweight, Islam carried himself with the poise of someone defending a throne, not chasing one. What stunned Usman most was the timing. Every takedown hit exactly when Jack tried to reset. Every leg kick landed right before Jack planted to punch. Every scramble ended with Islam a full step ahead, almost casually drifting back into dominant position. Usman even compared the pressure to his own prime, the era when he suffocated the entire division and made contenders look like sparring partners. Except this time, he was the one watching in disbelief. To Usman, Islam didn't just belong at welterweight, he looked like he'd been born there. But then Cejudo stepped in with the first bomb. Henry Cejudo didn't waste a second before calling out what most fans completely missed. Jack didn't get outclassed by some lucky game plan, he got systematically dismantled by a flawless one. Cejudo broke it down like a surgeon, explaining how Islam built a loop that Jack could never escape. First came the sharp calf kicks that chopped into Jack's balance. Then right when Jack tried to plant his feet to counter, Islam shot in with picture-perfect timing. And once the fight hit the canvas, the suffocation began slow, steady, and impossible to shake off. But the real shock in Cejudo's breakdown came from something almost nobody noticed: Jack was sabotaging himself. Multiple times, right as the round was about to end, instead of staying down and letting the clock run, Jack tried to explode back to his feet. In any other matchup that might show grit, against Islam, it was a disaster. Those last-second bursts meant he never had a moment to breathe, no time for the lactic acid to drain, no chance for his coaches to reset his mind. He walked into every new round already halfway spent, while Islam looked like he'd just finished warming up. Cejudo said it plainly: one tiny detail, standing at the end of rounds, ruined Jack's entire recovery window. And once that cycle started, there was no way out. But someone else saw an even bigger problem. Jorge Masvidal didn't even wait for the analysts to finish talking before saying what half the MMA world was thinking: Islam is the real pound-for-pound king now. Not because of hype, not because of narratives, but because the man walked into a heavier division and treated a champion like a warm-up drill. Masvidal pointed out the same thing Usman saw: Islam's gas tank looked infinite, his strength looked unnatural, and his technique felt like something built in a different universe. And then Sean O'Malley dropped the line that cut deeper than anything else: Jack got thrown into a wood chipper. He admitted it openly. When he won his belt, he got Cheeto for his first defense. Jack got Islam Makhachev, a bigger, stronger, nastier version of the same fighter who was already dominating lightweight. O'Malley called it what it was, a nightmare matchup disguised as a championship opportunity. Then came the moment that sealed Jack's fate. In a flash of desperation or misplaced confidence, he attempted a hip throw on Islam, one of the worst possible choices. O'Malley and Masvidal both agreed that was the turning point. Islam reversed the move instantly, and from that moment on punished every scramble like he'd already practiced the exact reaction in camp. To them, this wasn't just domination, it was inevitability. But Bisping exposed the real beginning of the end. Michael Bisping didn't waste time analyzing scrambles or submission attempts. To him, the entire fight changed within the first 60 seconds. One calf kick, just one, shattered Jack Della Maddalena's foundation. Bisping pointed out something most fans completely missed. Jack's entire style depends on tight boxing footwork, constant pivots, and sharp angles. The moment Islam nuked his lead leg, all of that vanished. From that point on, the dominoes fell fast. No movement meant no sprawl. No sprawl meant every takedown hit the mat clean. And once Jack was on his back, the rest of his game evaporated. Bisping explained how every takedown drained Jack's power like a leaking battery. By the time they stood up again, Jack's punches had lost all snap. His jabs were slow, his counters were off rhythm, his combinations had no bite. Meanwhile, Islam looked like he hadn't even broken his warm-up sweat. His timing stayed sharp, his pressure never dipped, and his breathing calm, almost eerie. Bisping even said Jack's legs were so compromised that he couldn't switch stance, a death sentence for a boxer facing a wrestler with perfect timing. Jack wasn't just losing exchanges, he was losing options. To Bisping, that first calf kick wasn't a setup. It was the kill shot delivered before most fans even realized the fight had begun. And then the conversation took a shocking turn. The moment Islam's hand was raised, the entire MMA world shifted to one question, a question nobody dared ask even a year ago. Has Islam Makhachev already surpassed Khabib? Analysts didn't hesitate. Some pointed straight to the resume. 16 straight wins, tying Anderson Silva's legendary streak, championship defenses, and now becoming the 11th double champion in UFC history, something even Khabib never attempted. On paper, Islam's list of accomplishments is already longer, heavier, and more complete. But the shockwave came from Khabib himself. In an old interview, he openly admitted that in a hypothetical fight, Islam might actually beat him. Coming from a man who retired undefeated and barely lost a round, that admission hit like a nuclear blast across fan bases. It wasn't trash talk, it wasn't hype. It was honest respect and a clue that Khabib always knew Islam's ceiling might be even higher than his own. Still, the MMA world remains split. Some argue Khabib's dominance was untouched the way he ran through McGregor, Gaethje, Poirier, and everyone else with a level of violence Islam hasn't always needed to show. Others say Islam's willingness to move up in weight and challenge bigger champions places him on a different tier entirely. It's resume versus aura, achievements versus mythology, precision versus brutality. And for the first time, the debate feels real, not emotional, not nostalgic, but grounded in what Islam just did at UFC 322. But the coaching room finally revealed the missing piece. Javier Mendez, the architect behind Islam's rise, finally revealed what everyone suspected but couldn't confirm. Jack Della Maddalena wasn't just slowed down, he was compromised. That first calf kick didn't just sting, it wrecked his base so badly that Jack couldn't switch stances, couldn't plant, couldn't sprawl, and couldn't throw with real balance. Mendez said it outright, Jack's rhythm was gone, and once that happened, the fight was no longer competitive. Mendez even admitted they had to adjust the game plan mid-fight. When Jack landed clean in the clinch, they immediately scrapped knees from the strategy. That's how sharp Islam's team is. They don't just train a plan, they adapt, rewind, rewrite, and execute in real time. Then Luke Thomas came in with one of the most important insights of the entire night. He explained why no amount of training, no matter who you bring in, can replicate Islam's upbringing. Jack had Craig Jones, one of the greatest grappling minds alive, sharpening him. But Luke reminded fans that a few months of elite drilling cannot replace 20 years of Dagestani wrestling DNA. Islam's instincts aren't learned, they're lived. They're built from thousands of childhood hours wrestling on mats, on dirt, on concrete. When Jack tried to escape, Islam wasn't reacting, he was remembering. His body knew where to float, where to shift weight, where to block hands, where to trap hips before Jack even committed to the movement. Thomas said it best, Islam's reactions operate on autopilot in a depth of grappling that can't be taught, copied, or downloaded. It's not technique, it's inheritance, which leads to the terrifying final truth. The moment Islam's second belt wrapped around his waist, the conversation shifted from what he did to what he might do next. Suddenly, experts weren't just talking about welterweight anymore, they were whispering about middleweight. And shockingly, many believe it's not only possible, it's realistic. Robert Whittaker, a former champion at 185, even admitted Islam's strength, composure, and timing could translate frighteningly well against guys who walk into the cage at 200 pounds. Then came the fantasy matchups, the ones that don't feel like fantasy anymore. Islam versus Khamzat Chimaev, a collision of two monsters raised on pressure wrestling and chaos. Islam versus Ilia Topuria, the pound-for-pound matchup fans didn't know they needed until Ilia's name kept popping up from fighters who swear he's the only one with the explosiveness to crack Islam's code. But what matters most is the silent reaction across the welterweight division. The contenders aren't calling Islam out. They're not trash-talking. They're quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when fighters know the climb just got impossibly steep. Islam now sits tied with Anderson Silva's 16-fight winning streak, but he's doing it across two weight classes with a level of control and composure Silva never relied on. On paper, Islam has already passed Khabib in achievements. The only debate left is how far he plans to go. So the question becomes, is Islam Makhachev building an unstoppable empire, or is he becoming so dominant that the UFC simply can't keep up?